And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
The story of Donald Trump is about so much more than dodging a bullet. The combination of luck and audacity, he survived scandal, prosecution, and criminal conviction as he aims for a second term in the White House.
4 months from now, we will have an incredible victory, and we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
I'm Matt Frei, and I've been covering US presidential elections for 3 decades. This one really has been momentous, and not just because of Donald Trump, Joe Biden choosing not to seek re-election and being replaced by Kamala Harris. And right now, the result is too close to call. But speaking to insiders who've worked with and know Donald Trump, I'll tell you what a second Trump administration might look like, not just for America, but for the world.
Trump has said that on day one, he's going to build a wall, seal the border, and he's going to drill, baby, drill.
In 2016, we were sort of the dog that caught the car, and now we're just kind of planning in advance. I think we want to hit the ground running in 2025.
I think he could cause significant damage in a second term that might be beyond repair. I think withdrawal from NATO would be beyond repair.
Trump is an incredibly flawed candidate, and he engenders the hatred of others. Somebody who is an incredibly divisive and dangerous personality.
Not so long ago, most sane people would have thought that the idea of Donald Trump returning to the Oval Office as president for a second time would have been utterly fanciful. There was the bitterness over having lost the last election. There were his judicial issues. There was the division of the nation. But this time round, Trump and his people are far more focused. They are far more organized. They have a plan. And here, they feel that power is within their grasp. And Trump has a message for you. This time it's personal. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Miami, Florida, and Donald Trump's backyard. If you want to see what America under a second Trump administration might look like, this is a very good place to start. Many of his election pledges are played out right here. It's Sunday morning. I'm off to church. Where else? Going to a place called the Jesus Worship Center in Doral, which is a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood of Miami, right next to the international airport. And we're there to find the answer to one of the big mysteries of American politics in this election year. Why devout evangelical Christians have turned to Donald Trump en masse.
No president has ever fought for Christians as hard as I have. And I will keep on fighting, and I'll fight hard until I'm back behind that desk in the Oval Office, the resolute pastor.
The church's founder, former businessman and soft furnishing salesman Frank Lopez has met Donald Trump several times. He explained to me how he was prepared to turn a blind eye to Trump's behavior, which is hardly textbook Bible. Donald Trump is not exactly an obvious candidate to be supported by, a man of faith like yourself.
Yes. Well,
Divorced twice.
Yes.
Convicted by a jury of sexual assault.
Yes.
I mean, these are not exactly the kind of things you expect a devout Christian.
Well, but he was not convicted of sexual assault.
In the civil case, he was deemed liable.
When you look for a leader, you look for someone who makes the right decision. And I believe that he has a vision for America that I like.
Christians like Donald Trump because he delivers on appointing conservative judges to the Supreme Court and restricting abortion rights, on bolstering relations with Israel. They're expecting more of the same if he wins a second term, including limiting sex education in schools.
I feel like God is with him.
God is with Trump.
I feel like he fears the Lord, and he makes decisions that are biblical.
Let's all pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today, and we thank you for this nation that was born in 1776.
Before he entered politics, Trump's relationship with Christ and Christian values appeared somewhat sketchy. But over the years, that may have changed, as this footage of him taking part in prayers seems to demonstrate. Whether the newfound love for God is transactional or based on faith, we'll never know. But it has worked for Donald Trump. He even claims that it was God who saved him from the assassin's bullet.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Not supposed to be here. And I'll tell you, I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
And on June 14th, 1946, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God gave us Trump. God said, I need
When I first saw this extraordinary video, I assumed it was satire. But it's not. And what's more, it's been endorsed by the Trump campaign.
So God made Trump.
Do you think that Donald Trump was sent to this country by God?
You know, that's a great question, because when you go to the Bible, you see that God uses people that usually the common men don't approve or don't acknowledge. And there's a possibility, yes. I'll tell you this, during the 4 years that he was president, it was a good time for us.
And nowhere has Donald Trump's support for the church been greater than on the question of abortion.
As your president, I will continue to stand proudly for pro-life policies, just as I did for 4 strong years. That's why when I'm reelected, I will continue to fight against the demented late-term abortionists in the Democrat Party who believe in unlimited abortion on demand and even executing babies after birth.
In 2022, the Supreme Court overturned the ruling known as Roe versus Wade that guaranteed federal rights for abortion. That was due to Donald Trump being able to appoint 3 conservative justices to the court during his first presidential term. I'm on my way to the front line of that issue, to the Women's World Medical Center in Fort Pierce, north of Miami. It's been providing abortion since 1991. Until earlier this year, the abortion limit here was 15 weeks. But now, thanks to the Supreme Court allowing individual states to decide, it is down to just 6. Why is it necessary to have a pro-choice escort like you here at this clinic?
Well, just for example, today, the first client I walked into the clinic said, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so scared.
She said she was scared?
Yes.
Of the demonstrators?
Yes. The protesters made her feel so stressed. They often take pictures of our patients, and that's unnerving.
Inside, I saw for myself proof of the dangers that those working in abortion clinics run and the precautions they must take.
That's Dr. George Tiller. He was murdered in 2009 in a church.
Murdered by anti-abortion activists.
Correct, with a shotgun. Terrible, terrible.
The political climate around abortions has really changed, hasn't it, in recent years?
I think the religious right has taken over our government.
And if Trump gets back into the Oval Office?
I think he would shut everything down because they want to do a national abortion ban. A national abortion ban. Doesn't matter what the states say anymore. A national.
He says he doesn't. He says he wants to leave it up to the states.
Yeah, that's bull.
So what do you think he should do in the second term regarding abortion?
The same thing that he did in the first term.
Which is?
Which is not approve funds, federal funds, taxpayer dollars to pay for an abortion. Abortion, they call it health care. There's no sickness of being pregnant.
I came across a wider worry here, that his second Trump presidency, fueled by the religious right, might start to impinge on a range of issues affecting women and civil rights. What does it say about women's rights in this country, that this fundamental right of abortion has been rolled back?
It's not only a war on women, it's a war on gay people and all that. I mean, he's just attacking every gender, every nationality.
Fiona Hill has worked with 3 presidents, George Bush, Barack Obama, and most recently Donald Trump, as an advisor on Russia. A Briton who's lived in America for 40 years, she's been in a unique position to see how Trump appears to thrive on creating division.
Trump is a very canny politician. He can tap into people's sense of grievance. He doesn't play to their better angels. He plays to their worst instincts, and he knows exactly how to do that, which makes him very clever, very cunning. We have an incredibly flawed candidate for president in Donald Trump, somebody who has presided over an insurrection. We have communal violence, we have states pitted against each other, we have an incredibly polarized political system. So already the United States is on edge.
So this is quintessential Miami here. Lots of traffic, searing heat, water everywhere. There's so much money here because a lot of the people who used to spend their money and live in New York, they've all moved down here. Why? Because there is 0 state tax. One of the reasons, I think, why Donald Trump also rather likes living here. Another political mystery is Trump's rising popularity amongst Latinos. Why on earth should he be more popular amongst a group of people that he's been consistently rude about from the very beginning of his campaigning, calling them bad hombres or worse? Well, there are several reasons. One of them is that the community here rather likes a strong man, a caudillo as they call them in Latin America. And the Trump policy they really like? His hardline views on immigration.
We're going to close up our borders. We had the safest borders in the history of our country, and now we have the worst. They come in from prisons all over the world, from mental institutions all over the world. They're terrorists. What we're taking into our country by the millions. And we're going to end it on day 1. We end it on day 1.
Throughout Florida, Latinos are a hugely influential constituency. In Miami, nearly 2/3 of those living here are native Spanish speakers. And in some of Miami's larger municipalities, that figure rises to 90%. There are now 36 million Latinos entitled to vote in the US, and their votes might even swing the election. I've come to one of the leading Spanish-speaking shows in Miami to spend some quality airtime with the listeners and their station host, Lourdes Ubieta.
Ahora sí, Matt Frei está con nosotros en el estudio, presentador del Canal 4 de Inglaterra. Bienvenido, Matt.
Muchas gracias. Encantado de estar aquí. Estás muy amable. Sí, sí. Over the Florida airwaves, a flood of callers on everything from Trump's morality to the burning issues of this election campaign. Can I ask you a question, Luis?
Yeah.
If Trump wins the election, what would you like him to do in the first 100 days?
Lo primero es la frontera. Tomar acción tanto la frontera sur como la frontera norte, pero más que todo la frontera sur.
The reason why I'm voting for Trump is the same that my audience is saying.
Right.
Economy, security, immigration. And I think Hispanics, because we come from different backgrounds, as you said, people coming from Venezuela, from Cuba, and from all these dictators that have destroyed our countries. We don't want that in the U.S.
Yo soy una emigrante, totalmente cierto, pero yo emigré a este país hace 24 años de una forma legal, pero ¿sabes qué? Hay que ser controlado, porque antes habíamos aquí gente que estamos construyendo este país y no puede ser de que unos tengan que tenemos años aquí y otros no.
This has now become party central for a bunch of young people.
To find out what the impact might be of Donald Trump's draconian immigration policies, I took a tour of Miami with Yareli Zamora, who works for one of the main groups supporting recent arrivals. Trump, if he gets in, what are all the things that you're afraid he might do?
The mass deportations, the raids, the continuance of fear-based narratives, the continuance of painting immigrants as these evil people. I think that there's a lot of hatred that will come out of it. You have to understand what are the ways that he has villainized the immigrant community. For example, saying that immigrants are sending their worst and saying that immigrants are poisoning the blood of this country.
He's used that language.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot of white nationalism. It's also a lot of, again, fear-based narratives around what is happening in our communities.
I love America's party conventions in an election year, but I've never seen one like the RNC in Milwaukee, a cross between a beauty pageant and a political mass. The star is, of course, Donald Trump, fresh from surviving his brush with the Grim Reaper just 5 days before. He is the object of their cult-like admiration, a man more sinned against than sinning. But this time, it's different. Behind the adulation is some hard-nosed ideological planning.
And just imagine what he's going to do when we give him 4 more years.
Underpinning all these speeches and all this emotion is a blueprint for power called Project 2025, compiled by the Right-Wing Heritage Foundation in Washington. 922 pages of detailed policy stuff, everything from immigration to employment to national security. Donald Trump and his campaign have tried to distance themselves from the Heritage Foundation and its Project 2025. But much of what he's been saying in his campaign speeches mirrors many of their ideas. So we've left the iconic downtown of Miami with its skyscrapers and we're heading to the equally iconic South Beach. This is really the nexus of pleasure in Miami. Cafes, bars, restaurants, left, right and center. And it all looks incredibly prosperous. But peel back that veneer of prosperity and what you get is economic hardship. People feel that life has become much more expensive. Inflation, although it's come down significantly, is still biting. And people remember the Trump years as the good old days.
Families all across America are struggling under the brutal weight of Crooked Joe's failures, disasters, and heartless betrayals. You know that? While the stock market is making rich people richer, Biden's inflation catastrophe is demolishing your savings and ravaging your dreams.
Katie McFarland was one of Donald Trump's most loyal lieutenants during his first term. His special talent, rebooting the American dream.
Donald Trump thinks way outside the box because he's a business guy. He understands the power of the economic power, of trade, of tariffs, of taxes, of jobs. So he, even though he's a billionaire, could understand really what the American people were feeling.
And so when he came along, you genuinely thought this guy would be a breath of fresh air.
I thought this guy could change everything.
With the economy now in danger of taking another downturn, Donald Trump's big sell is that under him, taxes will be cut and jobs created. And back at the radio station, that's a winning message.
¿Tú piensas que es la cosa más importante en esas elecciones?
Sí. Y mira, el gobierno te puede decir bajó la inflación, pero cuando tú vas a comprar huevos y te vale 24% más, eso a mí no me importa lo que me digan. Hola, buenos días, bienvenida.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
¿Cuál es su nombre?
Manena. ¿Cómo me está yendo con la economía? Mal. ¿Cómo me está yendo con la educación de los niños? Mal.
Sí, los precios, la inflación.
La ropa, la universidad. Mi hija se está graduando ahorita. El yearbook, $105.
El votante de Trump está apostando a la gerencia de Trump, a cómo estaba el país cuando Trump estaba, los niveles de inflación que teníamos con el presidente Trump, a la calidad de vida que teníamos con el presidente Trump.
But don't people want a moral man in the White House? I mean, when Clinton behaved in an immoral way, they were very upset.
Like Kennedy? Moral like who? Like Bill Clinton?
Yeah, well.
Moral like who? Es que queremos que sean estos políticos químicamente puros. Su vida privada, ¿qué nos importa la vida privada del?
Much of the planning for Donald Trump's second term at the White House is based on a determination not to repeat the mistakes of the first. Then there were leaks and accusations that the White House machine was being undermined by both politicians and officials trying to sabotage the Trump presidency.
I think that President Trump and the people around him did not fully appreciate how resistant the bureaucracy and the embedded Washington
deep state.
Call it what, I don't think it's deep. I think it's right in front of your face. Deep implies that it's hidden right in front of your face. But how much resistance he would find from the bureaucracy, from the Washington establishment. And there was an enormous amount of resistance thrown into the gears, sand into the gears at every step.
John Bolton was National Security Advisor during Donald Trump's first term at the White House. The pair fell out, badly, and today there's no love lost between them.
Life inside the Trump White House was like working inside a pinball machine. There was no order, no discipline, no coherent thought, no looking forward. So it's hard to imagine a new Trump administration doing worse than what they did the first time. Trump has no philosophy. His decisions are like neuron flashes because he doesn't think beyond the moment. I think he has an infinite span of attention when it comes to the best interest of Donald Trump. He has the attention span of a fruit fly for most other issues.
Next time round, the Trump White House promises to be very different. The emphasis on loyalty rather than experience.
So do you think then that the mistakes of the first term have informed the planning for the second term?
Oh, I think definitely.
In what way?
He will know the importance of putting people who agree with him and realize that he's the boss setting the tone. And those are the people he will put in office. And I think there will also be a lot more detail about the policies. So Trump 2.0, is a lot of the same policies, some of the same people, but far more effective.
We already have some clues about what kind of administration Donald Trump will want to run, thanks to John McEntee and his meteoric rise up the White House ladder.
I was 24, 25. I started as a campaign volunteer, worked my way up, had a lot of different jobs on the campaign, was a scheduler, a trip director, coordinated travel for the campaign staff.
You were literally the bag carrier.
I was the bag carrier, yeah, and the food coordinator. And that morphed into the personal aid job in the White House, and that's what I did for the first year of the administration.
Such was his devotion to Donald Trump that John McEntee was then promoted to run White House recruitment, a huge job.
It is in charge of 4,000 political appointments, anything from the secretary to the scheduler.
And you were how old at the time when you did that job?
At the time of that job, I was 28 or 29.
How important will loyalty be, do you think, in a second Trump administration, should there be one?
If you don't agree with the agenda, you shouldn't be there. So I think it's incredibly important to have people that are aligned with the agenda from the beginning, that can hit the ground running in 2025 and deliver.
I think this is the kind of approach that will lead to even more chaos, because you'll have people who don't know much about the substance of their jobs. They know only one thing, which is loyalty to Trump, and that will come back to haunt them.
This is Fort Pierce, and this is the mammoth courthouse where Donald Trump was due to appear on federal charges of having hamstered away secret government documents in his residence.
That trial is now unlikely to happen thanks to a federal judge appointed by Trump who decided back in the summer that he had no case to answer.
Here we go.
And this hasn't been his only run-in with the law. At one time, he faced 4 criminal trials, and he's already been convicted in one in New York, a historic first.
There is nobody who has been a credible candidate for the presidency who has had a conviction already on the books when they are campaigning for office.
That criminal conviction in New York might be unprecedented, but under the US Constitution, even that is no bar to someone standing for president. The reality is that the founding fathers had never reckoned with someone like Donald J. Trump.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt.
Is Donald Trump running for the White House to stay out of jail?
If he becomes president, he would doubtless ask the Justice Department to dismiss the federal prosecutions against him in Washington, D.C. and in Florida. He'd also ask the Justice Department to intercede in the Georgia and the New York criminal cases. And it seems to be very likely that they would be at least put on hold pending his departure from the White House.
But Donald Trump would be well into his 80s at that point, meaning it's doubtful whether he would ever stand trial.
At 5:30 in the afternoon on the I-95, about 5 miles from Miami. This is peak motorists' misery. This is a 10-lane highway that stretches all the way along the east coast of America from the Canadian border down to the Florida Keys. And at this time of day, it is literally hundreds of miles of traffic jam. And they keep building more highways, just like this one. You can call it Florida's contribution to climate change.
In parts of Florida, they've been investing heavily in seawalls, more than $1 billion to combat the rise in sea levels, more than a foot in the last 40 years. But with further projected rises, you can only build seawalls so high. Trump remains a proud climate change denier, and his second administration would likely be no different, not least because he'd promote the interests of the fossil fuel industry just as he did during his first term.
The minute I'm back in the White House, we will also unleash the most powerful economic weapon. We will drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill.
Donald Trump understood what energy independence would mean for the United States. And so he's been a proponent of the fracking industry, and this would give America an abundant supply of oil and natural gas to power the world for hundreds of years, and we could do it more cheaply and safer than any other country.
On the May Day that I was there, it was a sweltering 35 degrees centigrade, 8 degrees hotter than the seasonal average.
A state of emergency in Florida after life-threatening flash floods wreaked havoc on parts of the state.
From an excess of heat to an excess of water, 4 weeks later, monsoon-like rain.
We're really seeing flooding all over the state of Florida. If we pull back from reducing the driver of climate change, from reducing dangerous carbon pollution, we're going to see just a huge increase in all of these extreme weather events. We cannot wait till later to act. We have to act now.
Liquid gold. We're going to make so much money with our liquid gold. We were all set and we were starting to do it. We were energy independent. Within 6 months, we were going to be energy dominant all over the world.
If Donald Trump were to win a second term, it would be a disaster. And if the United States steps out of playing a leadership role on the global stage, it is going to give political cover to other countries who have hesitancy or don't always want to be the first out on the dance floor.
and it's America's place in the world, and the likelihood that the focus will be less on global affairs and more on matters at home that may be the biggest change if Donald Trump wins his second term in the White House. And that could have huge consequences for us all.
This square-jawed monument doesn't just commemorate America's victory in World War II, it also commemorates the ideas, the solidarity, the commitments, the shared responsibilities of the Pax Americana born out of the Second World War. If Trump gets back into power, plan for many of these ideas behind these granite stones to crumble fast.
NATO, the alliance with Europe that has existed for more than 75 years, may be one of the casualties. Donald Trump has already goaded Europe by saying that he would encourage Putin to attack those countries that haven't been paying their fair share.
I think people should take very seriously the possibility he will withdraw from NATO, which would
Seriously?
Yes, which would be a...
His people deny that, by the way.
Yeah. It would be a catastrophic mistake for the United States to withdraw, and the people who say he's not really going to do it haven't seen him. I was with him in Brussels in 2018 at the NATO summit. He came within a hair's breadth of withdrawing, and I think he's perfectly capable of doing it in a second term.
And again, NATO has taken in billions of dollars more because of me, because I said, you're delinquent, you're not paying. To many of the countries, the United States, as you said, is paying 80% of the cost of NATO. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's getting people's attention. I mean, when people in Europe say, oh, President Trump's going to pull out of NATO, he's so mean to everybody. Look, I think he's shaking the Europeans by the lapels and saying, would you please contribute to our common defense? Because you're not. We've been carrying you for decades. What kind of an alliance is it if there's only one country that's paying for the common defense?
I make this promise to you as president. I will restore peace through strength, and we will stop World War III. We will not have World War III. And I know all the players. I know them all. I know them all.
President Trump is not going to be an American leader who's going to be pushed around, and he's going to be a formidable adversary. And he is really a genius. And but the thing is, I totally think he's a genius.
Why?
Well, first of all, it's instinctive.
How is his attention to detail?
He's a big picture guy. But, you know, you work out the details. He's a big picture guy, but he gets the big picture when most of the guys who are doing the details, they never get the big picture.
There are a few loyalists who still describe him as a genius. Is Donald Trump a genius?
No, he's not. He really doesn't understand what American national interests are.
Did he do his homework? Was he ever focused on any particular task?
Well, he didn't read very much at all. He didn't study briefing papers. Before meeting with Putin, he asked John Kelly, the chief of staff, if Finland was still part of Russia.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after I win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. Look, that's a war that would have never taken place. Putin would have never done it, would have never done it.
When he says he can end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, what does he actually mean?
He has no idea what he means, except he knows he's the greatest deal maker in American politics.
Does he actually believe that?
I think he does. I think he does. So he has said he'd get Zelensky and Putin in a room together and they'd solve it in 24 hours. But Zelensky won't make the necessary compromises. So it will turn out poorly for Ukraine if that happens.
Do you think that there is genuine friendship between Putin and Trump? Does he admire Putin?
Well, I think Putin thinks Trump is a laughing fool and an easy mark.
How dangerous would a second Trump administration be for Ukraine?
Oh, extraordinarily dangerous. And the decision about Ukraine is not just an issue about US-Russian bilateral relations. This is about the whole future of Europe, because what Vladimir Putin has done is challenge European borders. Putin is basically saying that Ukraine does not exist as a country. And if he can say that about Ukraine, he can say that about any other European country.
If Donald Trump becomes president again, does this make World War III more likely?
It makes it more likely that this gets out of control, absolutely, because Donald Trump is not the man to be able to decide issues of war and peace.
Back at the Republican convention in Milwaukee, the faithful have gathered to hear the grand finale, Donald Trump's speech. After the attempt on his life, there were expectations he might tone down the rhetoric, if only not to put off voters in the swing states, without whom he cannot hope to get elected. But I'm not sure what worries me more, Trump winning or Trump losing and disputing the result as he did last time.
We had that horrible, horrible result that we'll never let happen again. The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They used COVID to cheat. We're never going to let it happen again.
If he loses the election again, do you think he'll concede this time around?
No, because Donald Trump never loses. Other people are losers. He's a winner. The question is whether he's really able to do anything about it.
Back in Miami, I discovered that others supporting Donald Trump take a rather different view, a sign of just how polarized this society has become and the dangers that may lie ahead, that the result of the election might even be ignored from the pulpit.
Amen. If the people of the United States see that the process of electing a president or any leader, it is manipulated and is corrupted, I believe that the people will arise. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
And would you then use your power over your parishioners to tell them to calm down? Or would you say, you know, some injustice has happened here, you have the right to rise up? What would your message be?
That is a great question. I don't know what I would do.
You don't know what you would do?
No. We're always for peace and unity, but we want a real government. We want a real nation. We don't want to be manipulated and lied to.
I'm worried about the rhetoric and the thresholds that have been crossed already in terms of the way that people think about each other. No matter what happens, there are going to be people who do not believe in the outcome of the election and will be ready, to take up arms.
During his campaign for the White House, Donald Trump made much of the rights of the president, that the office was somehow unfairly constrained, and that the president should be given immunity from prosecution and carte blanche to do as he or she pleased.
You're going to have to give the president, you're going to have to allow a president, any president, to have immunity so that that president can act and do what he feels and what his group of advisors feel is the absolute right thing.
Maybe no surprise then that in July, following an application by Donald Trump's lawyers, the US Supreme Court ruled that the president should have immunity. And the prime beneficiary, as a convicted felon, Donald J. Trump.
What's striking about the US Supreme Court's opinion in Trump versus the United States is that it announces a species of immunity for criminal prosecution for the president and the president alone that is sweeping in its scope. As a consequence of this ruling, the criminal law does not apply to presidents.
On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Unfortunately, he keeps his promises.
This isn't a tirade from some left-wing group, but a video made by non-Trump supporting Republicans concerned about another Trump presidency.
Trump replaces over 50,000 civil servants with hardline MAGA loyalists. The federal oath of office now requires declaring loyalty to the president, not the Constitution. Protected by the Supreme Court's grant of total immunity for official acts, Donald Trump orders the Department of Justice to arrest members of the January 6th Commission.
The video gives an apocalyptic view of what lies ahead and how Trump might use the Supreme Court ruling to his advantage and the consequences for America's democracy.
Trump ends birthright citizenship by executive order and turns millions of American-born citizens into illegal aliens overnight. Mass deportations begin.
Let's be really clear here. So if President Trump, were he to be re-elected, were to order as president the assassination of someone like Liz Cheney because he thinks she's treasonous, he could get away with it.
Under the Supreme Court's ruling of this summer, if the president orders an assassination, that order is not a criminal act in the way that it would have been 6 months ago.
Does this not put chills down your spine, just saying the words you've just told me?
I certainly think that anyone who is concerned about the quality of American democracy and the misuse of the awesome coercive powers of the American state ought to be deeply concerned about the Supreme Court's ruling in Trump versus the United States.
One thing I've learned is that it isn't in Donald Trump's nature to hide his intentions. He's made it clear that if he wins in November, he would use every power at his disposal to settle old scores and go after his enemies.
We will cast out the communist, Marxist, and fascists. We will throw off the sick political class that hates our country. We will rout the fake news media. And we will drain the swamp. We will liberate our country from these tyrants and villains once and for all.
He sees himself as having been victimized by many people in his first term and by enemies in Congress and around the country. And while he characterizes his targets as people trying to attack his base, he really means Donald Trump.
So he will be vengeful?
I think retribution is maybe one of the few multi-syllable words he really understands.
If you would please rise, raise your right hand. I will begin by swearing you in.
Fiona Hill famously took part in one of the impeachment trials against Donald Trump, giving evidence over the alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. She fears that if he becomes president again, he'll use the powers he now has to come after her.
If Donald Trump is elected, do you, Fiona Hill, expect a knock on the door one day?
I don't know whether it'll be a knock on the door, but it'll certainly be, something, a letter in the mail, from the IRS or, something else. I'm sure that it will not be just me. It will be an awful lot of people. I would not flatter myself by thinking I'm top of the list.
I've been covering American politics for over 30 years, and in the course of making this film, I've become increasingly aware of just how toxic and tribal politics here has become. The transformation is gathering pace, and it is dangerous. And I, as well as many Americans, believe that for the first time since the Civil War, the Republic itself might now be in peril.
He's very smart about people. He knows their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, more than anything else. And so people should never underestimate Donald Trump.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
We've already had a taste of what it looks like when this society starts to fall apart. And remember, America has a history of political aggression. From the Civil War to the Ku Klux Klan to the assassination of 4 presidents, violence is never far away.
If Donald Trump wins this election and he uses the law in the way that he's now allowed to use it, is American democracy finished?
I think what we see in other countries in which a charismatic, demagogical populist comes to power, where there's no constraint on his or her use of legal authorities, is absolutely a rapid decline in the possibilities of meaningful democratic rule.
When I came to America in 1989, as the land of opportunity, I never in my wildest dreams thought that America would turn out to be like basically Vladimir Putin's Russia. But this is where we are.
America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, brighter, happier, stronger, freer, greater, and more united than ever before.
What about those who say that electing Donald Trump is fundamentally endangering America's democracy?
If we can elect Donald Trump against the media, the establishment, the criminal trials, if we, the voters, can decide and say, nope, we still want him, and that happens and that process goes through, that's actually an amazing sign of, wow, the people do decide here.
And quite simply put, we will very quickly make America great again.
I don't think we're all going to sing Kumbaya, but I think results will speak for themselves. And I think that rallies people together. Maybe we're not going to all be united and hold hands, but I think the mood and the temperature of the country can be brought down through success.
I've never covered an American presidential election with so many twists and turns. Donald Trump's fight back after his criminal conviction, surviving an assassin's bullet. Then Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket.
Donald Trump knew how to deal with Sleepy Joe, but Kamala Harris is proving to be a very different proposition. Right now, the indications are that the election result will be close, likely decided by voters in the key swing states. But the stakes couldn't be higher. What I've seen of America during the making of this film has frankly shocked me. The divisions, the aggression, the rhetoric. Donald Trump has already said that he may not accept the result if he loses. And even if he does, many of his supporters may not. It's all on a knife edge. Better buckle up for what lies ahead.